Konbanwa, Annyeong, Hola, hi, and welcome to Malia's room. Yo soy Malia y me encanta hablar. Pues coge un poco de agua, algunos bocadillos y siéntate conmigo. Kyogo Shokai Suru Eiga no Taikuro wa Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes was released in 2011 and it's an action, sci-fi, thriller, and drama all in one. Our key characters are Will, Caesar, and Jacobs. But I first want to ask, have you ever heard of the last 1000 project? If you have, Moshita. If not, Kensha. I only recently learned about this in an anthropology course I took last fall, or yeah, I think last fall. And its focus is tracking down captive chimps who are being used for medical research and retiring them. If you'd like further context on that, I'm gonna either link or just show you the name of this clip that I literally had to watch this and write a report about it for my anthro class. The name of the video is Safe Haven for Chimps and it's free on YouTube. And it's on the channel called The Nature of Things. So you can literally just look up Safe Haven for Chimps, The Nature of Things, and you'll find it. But TLDR on that is that chimps are commonly experimented on. They've been sent to space. There's a movie about that too that's in the Planet of the Apes world. They're used as crash test dummies. There are some chimps that were purposefully exposed to HIV to test the side effects because chimps and humans are so similar that scientists, think, let's just infect a bunch of animals with a disease and then just do a bunch of tests on them and see what happens. Anyways, so they're also used as entertainment, like in circuses and shit. And all of this is just really terrible for their mental health. But after anthropologist Jane Goodall discovered that chimps have personalities, emotions, problem-solving skills, and use tools, scientists started to retire them as test subjects because, ethics and morals. However, in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, chimps are still being experimented on, they're still being abused, and they're held in terrible conditions. So now we'll just jump into it. What were the scientists at Genesis testing a drug called ALZ-112? And we're gonna hear ALZ-112 so fucking much. I feel like they could have chose a better name for it. I don't know. But the drug ALZ-112, he's testing on chimps to find a cure for Alzheimer's. The drug promotes neurogenesis, which is just the formation of new neurons. And Will has a vested interest in these trials because his father has Alzheimer's. Hi guys, it's editing Jason. I just realized I skipped a whole section of the script, so I'm gonna say it now because if I don't, it won't make sense. So Will sees success in the ALZ 112 trials, and he convinces Jacobs, which is his boss, to allow him to pitch moving on to human trials to the board of Genesis. But while this is happening, a chimp named Bright Eyes is becoming increasingly hostile towards the workers, and she eventually escapes her cage. Bright Eyes runs around the facility and busts into the room where Will is pitching human trials, and shortly after this, a trigger-happy security guard shoots her to death. So rest in peace, Bright Eyes. I do have to add here that I think it's insane how close the chimps' cages are to the office space, especially given that every room seems to be made of glass. Do we all know that chimps are notably stronger than humans? That's just not safe at all. But anyways, after this incident, Jacobs decides to put down all the chimps injected with the ALZ-112, presuming that all of them would be like a liability to the company if they end up violent like Bright Eyes. And the board also dubs the ALZ-112 human trials and takes the formula away from Mill, so he has to start over from scratch. I didn't mention his name earlier, but Franklin is a chimp handler, and he's understandably against putting down all the chimps. He's trying to explain to Jacobs that the chimps have personalities and their lives have value, but Jacob doesn't give a single fuck. Eventually, Franklin sneaks back into the office and discovers that Bright Eyes was pregnant and her hostility was just her protecting her baby. Ugh. Franklin tells Will to take the baby home because his brother is an op, and if he were to take it home himself, his brother would snitch on him, which is crazy because me and my siblings would never, but that's not not the point of this. Will hesitantly takes the baby chimp home and he introduces it to his father, Charles, who eventually names the chimp Caesar after Julius Caesar, which comes up more later in the other movies in the series, but we'll have a little discourse about it later on in this video. Will and his father are fascinated with Caesar because despite only being born 2 days ago, he was able to hold his bottle and feed himself, which for like a human baby takes months. So, of course, after seeing this, Will decides to keep Caesar and continue his ALZ 112 research at home, hypothesizing that the drug was genetically passed to Caesar from his mom. Charles's Alzheimer's is getting noticeably worse, so Will gets the bright idea to steal ALZ 12 from work and inject it into his father. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I have a BA in psychology, a fresh BA in psychology, right? So I understand like the challenges that come with living with Alzheimer's. It's like terrible for the person living with it and also for their family. But I think it's crazy and like completely unethical to expose your father to not even just your father, just like any human, but especially your father to a drug that has literally never been tested on humans before because you don't know the implications of that and you could just be making things worse. Something else I didn't mention before is that Charles actually plays piano. However, because he has Alzheimer's, he has been unable to play well for a while. And after the injection, Charles actually played piano like was nothing. He was on that whole like I can't play piano for the life of me. But but when Will saw this, like Charles and him both became really optimistic about his recovery and like having found a cure for Alzheimer's. And I just want to say it's pretty fucked up there isn't a cure for Alzheimer's, but that doesn't mean that you should just experiment on humans, without permission. In the midst of this, Caesar, who had been yearning to play like the kids he saw outside his window, he left the house by himself and he was promptly attacked by the neighbor. Yep. I truly think this should have been a sign to Will that the fucking suburbs are not an appropriate environment for a chimp to grow up in, but if that happened, we wouldn't have movies, so let's move on. We'll take Caesar to the zoo to get patched up by the most gorgeous doctor ever, okay? I just have to say, I truly love women. Like, yes. The doctor's name is Caroline, but henceforth, I will interchangeably call her Dr. Yapping because she's absolutely stunning. Will successfully uses Caesar as a wingman to get a date with Dr. Yapping, and she pushes back on keeping Caesar in the suburbs. So they take Caesar to the Redwoods, San Francisco. Caesar asks for permission to go explore the woods, and once he gets it, he excitedly runs into the forest and climbs as high as he can. He's really just running buck wild. They do this whole montage with him running around the redwoods for like 5 years, and then after we get Caesar aged up, he's still living in the suburbs, but he's just regularly taken to the redwoods for like enrichment. And on one of these trips, Caesar, Will, and Caroline run into a dog, and this is when Caesar begins to question like his identity and I guess his status because he noticed that both he and the dog are on leashes. Will takes Caesar to Genesis and explains that his mother, Bright Eyes, is dead, and she was giving AOZ 12, which is why he's so smart. And Caesar does not forget about the lab. Like, as they're driving away, he's looking back at the lab, plotting. Caroline explains that Will is wrong for using Caesar solely for research and ignoring his needs for a different environment, but Will, of course, like downplays it because he's only focused on his research and like trying to cure his father. He don't really care about Caesar as like a living being. It's kind of fucked up. But Caesar struggles to come to terms with his existence after hearing about his mother. And Charles, while Caesar is contemplating his identity, right? Charles made his way outside and into his neighbor's parked car. He switches up reverse and drive, so he just crashes the car twice. All I have to say about this is, why the fuck does Will leave his father and Caesar home alone? And why the fuck did the neighbor have his car on with the door wide open and he was all the way inside of his house? Like, maybe like having the car on, okay, maybe you're warming the car up, right? But why is the door open? I don't know, that's fine. This is the same neighbor from earlier that was like attacking Caesar. This time he's manhandling Charles and yelling at him, and he calls the police. So after witnessing all of this from his attic window, Caesar gets pissed off and he goes to attack the neighbor in defense of Charles, and he bites that motherfucker's finger off. That's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. I'll say this, I don't like the neighbor at all, but like, he definitely didn't deserve to have his car damaged and his finger bitten off. Like, oh my gosh, bro. Caesar feels guilty and sad and scared after what he did, and he sees like all the humans actually fear him. Well, after this incident, Caesar's taken by animal services because obviously, and this is when the movie has a shift. Like, prior to all this, it was just like fun. We're getting to know Caesar, we're getting to know Will, we're getting to know Charles and Dr. Yapping. And it's just like, it's all working and it's pretty happy and like stable. But after this, everybody, Yapping, lock in, okay? But because of legalities, Will can't take him home. And I'm not crying, guys. I'm not crying, guys. I promise I'm not crying about this. I promise when I watched this when I was younger, and when I rewatched it the next 2 times, I wasn't a little bit tearing up in the scene. I promise. And a bunch of science shit happens, but I'm pretty much gonna skip over it because I'm only interested in Caesar's storyline, and none of the science stuff is really important to the rest of the plot. Nor does it like really make sense in my opinion. But I have a BA, not a BS, so take that with the grain with a cup of salt, right? TLDR, Will convinces Jacobs to restart the research in ALZ 112 by explaining to him that he tested the drug on his father and it had promising results. See, his first day in the pen, he splashes one of the caregivers with his food, and all the chimps start laughing. So he gets blasted with the water hose, and I said, damn, is this the march on Salem? Like, parallels, anyone? Will restarts the trials on ALZ 12, and unfortunately, during one of the experiments, like during like, I don't know, like a surgical process, I don't know, right? BA, not BS, thank you. But like, he gets exposed to a drug. I'm not sure which drug it is. I think it's the ALZ 112. But just like in a smoke form instead of a shot. I'm not gonna lie, this frightened the fuck out of me because what type of lab is this? Like, first, the chimps break out of the cages. Then, during one of your experiments, one of your workers gets exposed to a gas that hasn't been tested on humans. And we don't know the side effects of it. And we all just pretend like it's okay. Like, literally, during the experiment, his mask came off. He got a face full of the smoke from the drug. And then he just put his mask back on and they just continued the experiment. That's not how experiments work. What are we doing? Now, as I said earlier, Caesar is basically in the pen. If you know what the pen is, I just mean like prison. Like, he's basically locked up, right? When he gets to the outdoor enrichment area, the head honcho starts beefing with him, and he's just like beating his ass to assert dominance. My initial reaction to this, like, I literally wrote down in my notes, this is like the first day of 9th grade all over again, especially when it comes to lunch. Like, your first lunch in high school and you don't know where the fuck you're sitting, and it's like a big ass lunchroom full of people that you don't know, or maybe you do know, but like, you're not cool with them for real. Like, you can't go sit over there. Like, and the seniors, I don't know, at least that's how I felt, me personally. Everybody's looking at you, you don't know where you fit in, you're not gonna get your ass beat, you want to make friends. It's just anxiety inducing. And mind you, Caesar has never been around other chimps before his entire life. But I can say that it's good Caesar didn't win his first fight, because when you win a fight on your first day, that means that people are gonna be coming every day looking for you to beat your ass. No funny shit. Going back to the ALZ 112 trial, Jacobs notices that one of the chimps they were experiencing on, named Koba, wrote down his name, and not Koba's name, Jacob's name. And instead of taking this as a sign of something bad, Jacobs is like excited about this, and he decides to accelerate the trials. I'm not gonna lie, Jacobs' reaction to Koba writing his name was so odd to me, because after writing his name, Koba gave him the most menacing look ever. Like, and also, the chimp knowing your name instead of its own name, is that not crazy? Because that means that its cognitive functions is focused on other people, not itself. And this is completely a side tangent, but I recently saw the trailer for this movie called Primate. It's coming out on January 9th. I'm pretty sure it's based on the Charla Nash story. If you don't know who Charla Nash is, she's a woman that owned a pet chimp, and it actually ended up ripping her face off, which is like terrible, but I'm definitely gonna go see the movie. The reason I bring it up is because it never fails to amaze me how much humans underestimate the intelligence of like other animals, especially other primates. More so, like, we overestimate how intelligent we are in comparison, thinking that we're the most intelligent species on Earth, when in reality, a lot of primates, especially chimps, are very intelligent. And to not consider that, I don't know, I feel like it's only a hindrance on ourselves and society and like humanity. Right, so Dr. Yepina and Will come to visit Caesar again and see that he's been beaten. And they threaten to get the facility closed down, but in the end they just left. And unfortunately, Caesar is told once again that he can't go home, and yes, I almost cried again. So after throwing a tantrum, Caesar begins to formulate a plan to escape the facility. And I didn't mention this earlier, but Will taught Caesar sign language, and one of the other apes in the facility is named Maurice. Maurice also knows sign, so they've been secretly communicating this entire time. The idiots that work at the facility invite their friends inside for some reason, and Caesar ends up finessing a pocket knife off of one of them. He uses the knife to open his cage, as well as the cage of one of the biggest apes in the facility, which is constantly on lockdown, aka like bro's in solitary confinement, bro. So Caesar uses his newly formed alliance with the bigger ape to take power from the chimp that beat him up on the first day. And now Caesar is the head honcho. Update on Will, his dad died. Rest in peace, Charles. But I mean, are any of us surprised by this? You gave your father a drug that has never been tested on humans before, and he was already in late stage Alzheimer's. After like the funeral and stuff, Will goes back to the facility to bribe the guy who runs it to let Caesar out, and it doesn't take much. Like, he successfully bribes him, but Caesar decides that he wants to stay in the facility instead of going home. Later on in the night, Caesar escapes the facility and he goes all the way like back to his original home with Will. And he steals the AOZ 112 serum that Will keeps in the fridge that he was previously using on Charles, and heads back to the facility. Exposes the drug to all of the other apes, by, you know, making it into a smoke form. And by making it, I just mean like stab the container in it. That's just how it works in the movie. In real life, I don't know, but that's how it worked in the movie. Random, and I say random not because it's not relevant, but because like in the movie it's just shown randomly as fuck. Franklin was found dead in his house by one of his neighbors, and it's like never expanded upon in the rest of the movie. I'm pretty sure they bring it up or expand upon it more in the later like movies in the series or the world, but not in this one, and I think that's just kind of crazy. Caesar puts Bell to ass and successfully gets all the apes out of the facility. They free the apes at Genesis and they start like fucking shit up. Jacob gets caught lacking in the lab, and all the apes are chasing after him, but unfortunately he successfully gets away by getting in a helicopter. This part of the movie is pretty long, but it's not very complex, so I'll just summarize it. Most of this is just like a bunch of action clips, because like I said earlier, it's also like an action movie. Like the apes are going on a journey to the redwoods, so they have to cross the San Francisco Bridge, and along the way they're fighting off the police with weapons and stealth tactics. And this is where like the imagery or the allusions to Julius Caesar come up, because Julius Caesar, I don't know that much about him. I researched him a little bit to make this video, but I wasn't actually taught that much about him in school. He's a Roman general, and he was known for like having really good military tactics. He also eventually got assassinated, which could be foreshadowing for the series. But Caesar, he's an ape, and he's also acting as a general. He's strategic, he's coordinated, he's level-headed, and he's brave. That's all I can really say for now. The apes suffer casualties, but Koba gets his lick back by kicking Jacob off the bridge. And visual of this, Jacobs is on the very helicopter he escaped in, hanging off the edge of the bridge, and the helicopter is like shaking back and forth, and he's asking Koba to grab his hand to pull him up onto the bridge, and Koba just kicks him. It gave This Is Sparta low-key. They all successfully make it to the woods. Will catches up to them and tries once more to convince Caesar to come home, but Caesar replies, Caesar is home. Will understands this and lets him go, and that's the end of the movie. On the surface, this movie is about animals escaping oppression and getting back to the nature that they're literally deserving of, because you know they need it to survive and thrive. But on a deeper level, this movie is a representation of the power the oppressed class has in numbers. This movie tells us that it's wrong to use and abuse animals and just like living beings for benefit, whether that benefit is money or for your own personal issues. And it shows us that chimps are not brainless creatures, but they have personalities and they have brains. They're capable of cognition, emotions. It also reminds us that there is a natural order to the world that capitalism cannot change, or more so that we like should be aware of the effects of capitalism changing that order. Because to try and change that order, it's only dangerous and destructive for both the people that are being affected by it, or the living beings that are being affected by it, and everyone else. Because if you think about it, all the people on the block or in the suburbs or just on the bridge that had to deal with a bunch of chimps just randomly coming out of nowhere and kind of destroying shit and jumping on their cars, would that have happened if it weren't for capitalism and big pharma? If Jacobs didn't want to profit off of selling the drug to cure Alzheimer's and didn't care about the ethics of it like he did, would all those people's cars be fucked up? Would their car insurance be going up? Would they have had to run out of their cars off of the bridge? You know, these are the implications. I've liked the Planet of the Apes movies since I was younger. I think I initially watched them with my father, at least one or two of them. So, because I'm an empath, like, I've always seen the value in being kind to living creatures, you know, if and when it's possible. And I'll probably do another breakdown or review on one of the other Planet of the Apes movies at some point. Now I'm going to be unbiased and rate this movie 3 out of 5. I'll admit 3 out of 5 is like kind of generous, because I guess if you're not really into the Planet of the Apes like world, or you don't really care about like chimps or like whatever, I'm not sure the movie will be received as well. I do want to note the action is like a good chunk of why this movie has 3 stars, because it's a good watch. While the plot is great and they're like character development, and like I said previously, because of the action shots, the movie is rewatchable. There are a lot of things in this movie that I feel could be better. For example, the movie is really long. It's about 2 hours. It doesn't need to be that. I'm sorry, it didn't need to be that long, bro. I like that it's a long movie because I like the Planet of the Apes world. But it don't need to be. It doesn't need to be 2 hours. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. It's a long watch. I don't know. The characters aren't that important to the plot. Like, majority of the characters that we spend so much of this extra time on are not that important to the plot at all. Caesar is the main character. Everything else that we see is just the outside world acting on Caesar, and it's like I'm sorry, I don't really care about Will and Jacob and Franklin, and I don't, right? And I guess they're also maybe not meant to care as much. It's just more so to see like how these lives all intersect and the impact of them. But again, 2 hours for that. I don't need to know that Will has a father that plays piano, and after he got unethically injected with a drug, he could play the piano better. I didn't need to know that if he was just gonna die later on. Like a key example of this is Franklin. He gets sick and dies, but it's never touched upon again in the film. Then we're also going back to Charles. We're introduced to Charles, but he's literally only there to create conflict that gets Caesar put in the facility, and then he dies. And then that's not even really necessary because Caesar already had a prior incident where he left the house and he got, hurt and it had consequences. What's to say that you could just remove Charles from the movie entirely and change this scenario to Caesar just goes outside again and gets into some shit and gets taken by animal services? Like, Charles is just not, he's not really a character. I don't know. He's just there. He's just there for Caesar to be like affected by, which is not really good for me to care about him because we're gonna spend so much time on him and we're supposed to like grieve that he's dead and we don't really know much about him other than that he has Alzheimer's and that he's Will's father and he plays piano. Like, I don't, rest in peace. But like, I feel this story would literally be the same with or without Charles. And even with Will, like, he doesn't have much character development, if any. He pretty much just goes from wanting Caesar to experiment on and like observe to accepting that Caesar is no longer like his property and that he's a living being with like feelings and needs and thoughts, But it's not like he really had a choice. He didn't have to go through the mental framework to change his mind. He quite literally didn't have a choice because in the movie, when this change happened with Will, it was Will with Caesar and Caesar's entire army, right? What was gonna happen if Will was like, no, you're gonna come home with me, you're gonna stop all of this? He would have just got his ass beat. I'm sorry. So again, not really. I don't character development, I don't know. A change in character is not necessarily the equivalent of character development, if you get what I mean. Anyways, Dr. Yapping, Caroline, she really didn't like have much depth in this film. She just acted as a love interest and like a guiding source for Will on his journey to having a better moral compass, which I feel is a role that so many women in film are cast into. And it's like, I just don't like that. Like, why is she just like Will's love interest and like his moral compass? Like, all of Will's character development is because of things that Caroline says to him, but he doesn't actually take them in. He kind of just is forced to accept it in the end of the movie. So like, even on the bridge, this is like off script, but on the bridge when Will was trying to get to Caesar, Caroline created a distraction by using herself so that Will could get to Caesar, and Will had essentially like given up when they got on the bridge, seeing all the cops, and the cops were telling them like, you have to get off the bridge, and Will was just gonna like comply, and she was like, no, like, she went up and distracted the police so that he could go and get Caesar. Like, she doesn't have much character other than a supporting role and he's not even the main lead, a supporting role for one of the other background characters. Like, damn, she's gorgeous. I feel like she deserved better. And lastly, there's really nothing special about the score or the cinematography. And just for like the clarity of this, the way that I give the 5 stars, right, I base this on the plot, the character development, whether or not the movie is rewatchable, whether or not it has a memorable score or soundtrack, whether or not it has like memorable, good cinematography. Yeah, this movie only had 3 out of 5 of those things, a generous 3 out of those 5, because I don't like doing half points. Hi guys, it's editing me again. I'm just here to explain better why I give this movie a generous 3 out of 5 stars. This is more specifically relating to the character star that I give it. I think the fact that the plot and that the movie's rewatchable are pretty self-explanatory. It's a plot about a bunch of animals, a bunch of chimps that are like being mistreated, essentially fighting for and gaining their freedom. And in a really cool, like strategic and kind of scary ass way, right? And this kind of ties into why it's rewatchable in the action clips. Because if you didn't know, chimps are very like limber. Their bodies are like physiologically made up so that they can hang and swing and climb from trees or just from high altitudes. Um, so them making their way across the bridge, and even I guess just starting from them making it out of the facility and then going on that journey right to the woods, that entire thing is full of action shots that show like how chimps can move and like the physical advantages that they have over humans. Those are just shots that you're not gonna see everywhere. You don't see at all. I don't know, like maybe not often, maybe not at all. So that makes the movie rewatchable. I think being able to see the chimps like get justice and see the action and see like the deeper messaging in it, that's what makes it rewatchable. But to get back to the characters that I'm giving the point for the movie to are the chimps, not the humans. I think majority, if not all of the human characters in this show either don't have enough character for me to care about them at all, like Franklin and Caroline, or they're just like not good people, like Will and Jacobs and the people that worked at the facility, right? There's not much for us to care about, and we don't really know much about them. We only see in the fucking extra 2 hours, or not extra 2 hours, but the extra, time in the movie that's spent on the humans is literally just showing them being pretty horrible and like dealing with the consequences of being pretty horrible. Um, and it's just not like I don't care for them, right? You're not necessarily supposed to care for the characters, but the only reason I went on that whole tangent about the movie being 2 hours is because, like I said, a lot of that time is spent with the humans. A lot of that time is spent on the humans, and if we're not supposed to care about them, what is the point of spending that much time on them? Um, but yeah, that's my explanation. I do think the movie is rewatchable for the action and the plot. I think the plot is great and unique, and I think the chimps have great character development and just characters in general. Caesar specifically has great character development because he goes from being very naive, right? Very dependent on humans, very unsure of himself, to being confident, to being a leader, to not wanting to depend on the humans, to actually to want to distance himself from them. Um, and more specifically, his character development ties into his relationship with Will, who he sees as his father, right? Before Caesar was in the facility, he would ask permission, he would follow the rules. After he got in the facility, he realized that Will is not the the strongest power, right? Like Will is not stronger or smarter or more powerful or impactful than Caesar is. And Caesar takes the time in the facility to realize this. And then he just kind of walks in and he makes a decision not only for himself but for his species. And it's great to see him go from, being this naive, human dependent chimp to being like essentially what he's supposed to be. Uh, you know, having a position in a hierarchy, having other chimps that you socialize with and move with and protect and live with and form like a community with. That's normal chimp behavior. And it's all just great to see. I would say if any of like the chimp stuff interests you, any of the ethics in science and experiments interest you, this is a good movie to watch because, and this is a good like series, like it's a good world to get invested in because it teaches a lot about, like I said earlier, the effects of capitalism on the natural order of things. Like chimps should not be pets, chimps should not be unethically experimented on, they shouldn't be injected with HIV, they should not be used as test dummies, they shouldn't be sent to space. And this world, these series, like the series and all the movies, they highlight that a lot. And I watched this when I was a child. I watched a lot of the movies in this world when I was a child. So, I have pretty strong opinions about it now. And when I learned about it in Anthro, I was like, wow, like when I watched these movies, obviously I knew there was truth to them, but when I took the Anthro class and I had to report on this information of like chimps being unethically experimented on, I was like, holy shit. Like I've always been against this, but I didn't know like how it would really look and the implications of it, on the chimps. But that's all I have for you today. This has been Malia's Room. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, maybe subscribe if you enjoyed it. Jane, annyeong, hasta luego. Bye.